Joining us is the Deputy Opposition Leader Sussan Ley. Back to one of our top political story of the day. 650,000 migrants to arrive over the next 2 years. Sussan, what are your thoughts on that figure?
So important to get the balance right when it comes to the migration of skilled workers, where they live, what jobs they do, and how we keep the government to its promise, which was to skill Australians first. So out where I live, Pete, in regional Australia, people are crying out for a workforce, but of course they're suffering the same problems of lack of housing, and that only adds to not being able to get your workers in your business at the time that you need in a way that actually works for you. So it is a balance and it is a large number, and what we don't want is every single one of these migrants landing in our capital cities, because the pressure on housing and services there would be huge.
Okay, so is the balance right then?
Well, it's up to the government to get that balance right. Now, they need to do accurate forecasts. They've been very slow setting up the agency that is supposed to actually make this information available to both state and federal governments. They need to provide the intel to the system, if you like, that actually allows the balance to be correct when it comes to skilled migrants, Australians being skilled, and so on. So this could all have been worked out at the Jobs and Skills Summit. It wasn't. As I said, that was a talk fest at the time. Now we're actually dealing with the problems, but maybe we don't have all of the information we need. And of course, you've been talking, everyone's been talking about the lack of housing.
Okay, but just one more on this one. How do you force folks into the region? How do you force migrants into the regions? Because, you know, for most of them, they're going to want to go into the capital cities.
With priority visas that allow them to start their working life in Australia in the regions. That's what we had in government. That worked incredibly well. We had 88 days, 6 months visas in a region, and we got those workers where they were needed urgently, where the lack was even bigger than it is in the cities. And often they stayed there. Often they really enjoyed life in regional Australia, unsurprisingly, and they brought family members out over time and so on. But what this government did was actually not give any priority to regional migration, and that's causing problems right now.
Okay, so back onto that question of housing, because that's the obvious follow-up question to this huge number of people coming out. And just to make the point, we do need labour out here, we do need the workers out here, but people will say, well, where are we going to house them? So on that point, why not support the government's housing fund?
Well, the government's housing fund, by the way, Pete, and it's important that your viewers understand this, is not going to provide $10 billion of housing money. It's an off-budget fund, therefore it's inflationary. It's an investment by the government, the interest, the return from which they hope will provide enough money to pay back the loan and also to fund housing. And I think I've heard forecasts from the housing industry that the actual number that they've talked about is no more than the normal increase or the normal house build every year. So it's pathetically insufficient. The Parliament has found it out and therefore refused to pass it. Meanwhile, the government is busy not addressing the cost of living crisis, which is the inflation crisis, which is driving up the cost of everything that goes into a house, whether it be aluminium or steel or glass or bricks or cement. So we've got huge rises in input costs, which builders are struggling with, at the same time as we've got the government demanding that this fairly useless bill pass the Senate.
Okay, well, it claims 30,000 social and affordable homes would be built over the next 5 years. Are you saying that that's just not out of the ordinary?
Well, I'm saying they have to prove it. They have to prove that the cost or the returns from this fund will actually build homes at the rapidly increasing cost of those homes. Now, I heard the crossbench talk about the number as being $80,000 per home. Of course, you can't build a home for that. So what this indicates is the price of building homes is going up so rapidly. Meanwhile, all the government's answer to this is to simply borrow more money and hope that the returns of that borrowing somehow build more homes. It's not the right policy for a really urgent and desperate situation. But the main point, Pete, is that the input costs are skyrocketing along with inflation, and there's no plan to address that.
Well, Queensland's moving to make some changes. There are tax exemptions for build-to-rent programs, as well as a once-a-year rental cap. It's not the only state on that final point, but is that something that needs to be more widespread? What do you make of that policy?
All of the states should be addressing this issue, because the issue, of course, is around supply and planning, the release and development of land, and the cost to developers and builders once that land is released, and the huge time lags and it's the delays in actually getting to that point. So yes, of course, states should also be addressing this problem.
Sussan Ley, we'll leave it there. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.